The Babylonian captivity, the Bible makes it clear that God is patient, but his patience is not infinite. After centuries of warning, God decided to punish his people for their unfaithfulness. The northern kingdom of Israel was the first to fall, conquered by the Assyrians in 722 BC. However, the most significant punishment came later with the fall of the southern kingdom of Judah to the Babylonians in 1586 BC. After years of warning from prophets like Jeremiah, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar besieged, bes- the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and carried the people into exile. This event, known as the Babylonian captivity, was a devastating blow to the Israelites, the very people who were supposed to represent God's power and holiness to the world were now enslaved by a pagan empire. The Babylonian captivity was not just a physical defeat, but also a spiritual and emotional one. The temple, which represents God's presence among his people, was reduced to rubble. The people were separated from their land, their identity, and the symbols of their covenant with God in Psalm 137. The pain of the exile is captured in the lament by the rivers of Babylon when we remembered Zion. The purpose of the punishment, why the Babylonian captivity was a severe punishment. It was not the end of Israel's story. In fact, it served a greater purpose in God's plan. The exile was meant to be a time of purification and renewal for the Israelites. Separated from their land and the temple, the people were forced to reckon with their disobedience and idolatry. The prophets who had foretold the exile also spoke of a future restoration. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel all promised that after a time of punishment, God would bring his people back to their land. This restoration was not just about reclaiming territory, but about renewing the covenant relationship between God and his people. God promised to give them a new heart, one that would truly love and obey him. The return from exile and the promise of a new covenant. After 70 years of exile, the Israelites were allowed to return to their land, fulfilling the prophecy of Jeremiah under leaders like Zerubbabel, Azra, and Nehemiah. They began to rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. This return marked the beginning of a renewed covenant to the law and a rejection of idolatry. Never again would Israel turn to the worship of foreign gods as they had before exile. However, the ultimate fulfillment of God's promise would not come through the restoration of a physical kingdom, but through the coming of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. In Jesus, the new covenant was established, and God's plan for salvation extended beyond Israel to all nations. The defeat and punishment of Israel served as a powerful reminder that God is sovereign, just, and faithful to his promises, even when his people are not. Conclusion: the story of God's chosen people, their rise to power, fall into idolatry, and eventual punishment by Babylon serves as a profound lesson in the Bible. It reveals both the depth of human rebellion and the heights of God's mercy. Even when his people fail, God remains faithful, using both victory and defeat to accomplish his greater plan for redemption. The Babylonian captivity was not the end, but a turning point in God's story for was not the end, but a turning point in God's story of salvation, one that would ultimately lead to the coming of Christ and the establishment of a kingdom that transcends all earthly powers.